Hello, welcome, and as always, a good evening. And today we want to have a look at this nice piece of hardware. A couple of episodes ago, I modded an original Atari 2600 video game system to have composite output so that I can use it to play video games. It turns out that the games that I had were pretty nice, but that there's also a very active homebrew scene for the Atari 2600 and also for all the other 8-bit Atari machines. And you can play the homebrew games and the demos, etc., all on the Stellar emulator or other emulators, but it's of course much nicer to have it running on the original hardware on your TV in your living room. And to do that, you can make or buy one of several cartridges, and I think the most famous one or the most ubiquitous is this one, the Harmony cartridge. This is made by Fred Quimby, it seems. I will link to his website in the description where you can order one, and in cooperation with the Atari Age forums, which is a very excellent place for everything Atari. They have like all kinds of stuff in their forums. They have a store where you can buy brand new cartridges for all the homebrew games and a lot of tools and things, and a huge knowledge base basically. So the Harmony cartridge looks like any other Atari cartridge. There's the port down here, which gets opened by the console when pushing in. On the top you can see two things. You can see one USB connector, which we will use in a minute, and there's also a little slot with an SD card in here. I have, does it focus? I think so. I have a 16 GB card here, but to be honest, 1 GB is plenty. All the games that were ever made for the Atari 2600 will like fit in 10 megabytes, I think. So those are a couple of hundred games, most of them 4 to 8 kilobytes in size maximum. And the bigger games, homebrew games, will be 32 kilobytes. The Harmony comes just like this, with a small paper manual. Took a couple of days from the US to arrive here. There's a few things in here. You can choose between an SD card and a micro SD card version. I took the micro SD because that's more common nowadays. And it also describes firmware upgrade, and we'll have a look at that as well. And yeah, there's also technical specifications here. So the Harmony cartridge has a little 70 MHz ARM microcontroller, and a few kilobytes of SRAM, a few kilobytes of flash and EEPROM for basically the firmware. And yeah, that's more or less it. And it supports all kinds of ROM images for the 2600, because the original 2600 would support, I don't know, I think 4K maximum ROM. And then you need to start bank switching, and there's different bank switching methods, which are all emulated by this cartridge. So it will run, I think, all or almost all games that have ever been made for the Atari 2600. Furthermore, it also emulates some extra hardware, like the Sarah chip, which gives, I think, 128 or 256 bytes of additional RAM. So also games that use extra RAM on their cartridges will work. And it supports the homebrew melody format. Melody cartridges have a coprocessor for making music, because doing music and animation on the 2600 is almost impossible due to the limitations, there not being a frame buffer and everything being generated line by line. And there's will be nothing left for the CPU to compute also the music. And you will have music on the Homebrew games that you can put on here. And I think there's maybe 1 or 2 games that won't run on this cartridge itself, but you can still buy those on the Atari Age Forum store. Yeah, so in a minute we will have a look at how to update the software on this, and then we will plug it in and play some demos and games. And all in all, I can say this is absolutely fantastic. So I had absolutely no problems at all. I could play all the games, and it's easier because you don't have to plug and unplug cartridges all the time. Although the handling of the cartridges sometimes is also pretty nice. Has nice feel to it. So yeah, definitely a big recommendation from my point. I took the basic Harmony cartridge. They have an Encore version. I'm not sure if it is at all different, or it's only the software and they want to make up for development costs. I don't know. But the Encore version supports even bigger games. It supports up to 512K images, because some of the bigger demos or homebrew games will have bigger ROMs and even more advanced bank switching. One more thing, there's a few games, homebrew games, that need to have the Harmony or Melody module, because they will use the ARM processor that's on here to prepare data. It's not really doing the game logic or anything, but I think they use it to prepare game data and render some stuff like the Starfield in Galaga. You will see that. So the Galaga homebrew version and the Mappy homebrew game will make use of the ARM processor in here, and they would look not as nice on a stock Atari without this extra chip. But I think that's fair enough, because later 2600 games like Pitfall 2 and similar things had little co-processors on their cartridges to spice up the console a bit and produce music or do some other stuff. So I think it's fair game, and the developer said you have approximately 20% of the ARM CPU time to do additional stuff. The rest, the other 80%, are used for doing the bank switching and ROM emulation things. So you don't have much to work with either. And yeah, it turns out that you can make some pretty amazing demos and games with this. So let's have a look at the update process. We just plug this in, and then I'll switch over to the iMac. Alright, so from the Harmony website you can download the Harmony card software, and there will be an ARM subfolder where there's all the bank switching binaries and also the latest BIOSes and ELoaders. So the ELoader is, I think, sort of like a bootloader to load the actual BIOS, and the BIOS is more or less the menu system that runs on the Harmony and which will load the actual games. It will scan the SD card and look for compatible binaries, and it will try to load them. And the Harmony programming tool, you can just say connect device, and it will look for the Harmony card, and it found it on the TTY USB serial. On macOS you have to install the USB serial driver, which we already did, as you can remember perhaps, for the ESP8266 and similar devices. If you have the USB serial driver installed, this is the standard chip that's used on the Harmony cartridge, you're good to go. Otherwise you have to look up how to do that. Windows is similar, you need the same driver for this serial chip. And Linux probably has it already in its kernel, and you don't have to do anything, which is quite nice. After that, you can write a new EEPROM to the device, which I will not do. I will leave it at that. My cartridge came with I think with an NTSC EEPROM, but I said no, I want to have PAL 50 Hz so that it displays correctly on my TV. And later you will see that it still looks a bit weird due to the way it renders stuff. And the HBIOS has the same thing. I picked the PAL 50 Hz version. You can pick either PAL 50 or PAL 60 or NTSC 60. They have everything in here, as you can see. There's the NTSC version with 60 Hz or PAL 50 or PAL 60 Hz. Yeah, then you can also copy that BIOS, and once it is copied and the new EEPROM has been flashed, on the next startup it will simply install this BIOS version and will tell you to reboot. So that's that. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the features of the cartridge and some nice games and demos. The reasons I bought the 2600 was to play Donkey Kong with my wife. And this version, although it is fun, it is looking like crap actually. And yeah, there's actually a better homebrew version of this. And we had a lot of fun playing the original version, but to be honest, really the homebrew version is so much better. Just have a look. I mean, come on, this has scrolling levels, although the girders here are not angled. I'm gonna look over that. It has an intro, it has music, it has all the elements of the arcade version, it has all the 4 levels, as far as I know. There are no more. And it even has this nice end game animation as well. And yeah, it's so much fun to play. You see some slight flickering here. It's mostly due to my capture device or the composite converter. So depending on what you're using for playing, it will look really good, or on LCDs you might have this slight flickering effect here. So the menu system will scan all the ROMs here, and as you can see, this is also a bit flickery because this is the only way, I guess, to make high resolution text on the machine. You can just navigate with a joystick and, for example, pick Frogger here or any other ROM that you put on there. There's a library for download. I won't link to that because I think it's not quite that legal. So let's say you just dump your own cartridges. They are basically just standard ROMs. And yeah, have a play. The browsing experience is actually pretty nice. With the left and right movement of the joystick, you can skip pages. Up and down will scroll the list one by one, and the fire button, of course, selects stuff. And you will have, just like in DOS, for example, have the ... entry that will get you to the topmost or one level up directory. And you can just put it anywhere you like, but I suggest that you use some subfolders, for example, for the homebrew and the different ROM categories. Otherwise, you will get lost if you put too much stuff on there. So a lot of the old games are not that great. I tried some of them out, and sometimes I don't even know what to do. For example, with this, I would need the original cartridge and the manual. So I probably just stick to the games that I have also a physical copy of. And yeah, but some of the homebrew games are actually pretty nice. My current favorite game is Mappy. It's from last year, and yeah, I'm definitely gonna buy the physical copy of that from the Atari Age store at some point, because this game is really fun. It makes use of the ARM processor to manage all the scrolling and the music in the background. But other than that, it's also a very solid game. You play this nice mouse detective here that has to pick up the loot that the cat burglars stuffed into this house of theirs. And there are trampolines for whatever reason. And you can jump up and down with them and land on one of the corridors. And you mustn't touch one of the enemies at all, because that means instant death. And you lose 1 life, but you get every, I don't know, 10,000 or so points, you get another life. And it has so many levels that get harder and harder. They look similar, but the layout is a bit different, and there will be special stages in between where you have to collect balloons, and this makes for some nice, varied gameplay actually. And you can play this for hours, I think, because it starts off pretty easy but gets harder all the time. Second favorite of mine is Galaga. This is still the demo. I think it hasn't been quite released yet. It's from this year, and it will be soon available for buying from the Atari Age store as well. And it's a space shooter. It's the classic Galaga space shooter, and it's very awesome. It's, I think, the best shooter on the system. I haven't played that many so far, but you basically have this spaceship at the bottom and scores of enemies and wave after wave. And it's just pure fun, I have to say. This is something that you can just pull out and play all the time. And one more thing that you can watch on the VCS, on the 2600, are actually demos. The PC demo scene, or the demo scene in general, has been in existence for, I don't know, at least 30 years. And the idea here is that you code impressive musical and graphical programs that run by themselves and that make the best use of the hardware possible. And this is quite interesting, especially on the 2600 with its severe limitations. And here I will show you a couple of excerpts from some demos that I like, that I found. And every year there will be a couple of more demos coming out from the 2600. So the scene is still pretty much alive. They find new tricks and ways to render stuff in real time that you would have thought impossible on this machine. And the Harmony cartridge is actually basically the only way to see that on real hardware. The Atari Age store will flash you any binary onto a cartridge, but this will become pretty expensive because it's like $25 per cartridge or so. So I think this about wraps it up, and you can have a look at 2 more things here and enjoy the graphics and the sound. The sound is a bit stuttery. I think this is due to my capture device and the weird way the Atari produces sound. I'll work on that and I'll report back when I have a better solution. But for now, please do like, share and subscribe if you want to, and I hope to see you again very, very soon. Good night.